Hey there, welcome back to Diesel Creek. My name's Matt. Behind me, a 1952 Caterpillar D4 7U. I rescued this thing a few years ago and we're finally getting around to getting it fixed up here. In the last episode, you guys saw me tear down the transmission to get to the steering clutches. These are said steering clutches. And we discovered that they're in rough shape. So we're not going to be reusing any of the friction discs, and I'm ready to order the new parts to start getting this thing put back together. But there's a variable in here. These are the steel discs that go in between your friction discs. No new parts are free, so there's a chance that we can clean these up and make them still reusable and save a couple bucks in the process. I want to determine how many, if not all of them, are salvageable. Maybe none of them are salvageable. So we're gonna throw them in the sandblasting cabinet, get them all cleaned up here first thing, and then once we figure out what we really got to work with here, we're gonna order the parts and then start working on putting this thing back together. To the blast cabinet! I haven't used this cabinet very much yet. This is I think this is the second thing I'm gonna blast in here. So we'll see how it does. I'm doing this on a recommendation from somebody in the previous video. I was gonna send these to my buddy to put on his surface grinder, but somebody in the comments said that this was actually a better, cheaper way to do it, because the surface grinder wasn't gonna be free. Oh yeah, this is seeming like it's the ticket. Cleaning these things up really nice, and I'm not sitting here breathing in a bunch of dust. Quite the improvement already. I'm not gonna make you guys sit here and watch me clean each one of these up. I'll time lapse this and bring you back when we're done. So where do we pick back up on this thing? It has been sitting here for months and months at this point. I think probably close to 6 months. But we're no further than the last time you guys saw it. Only difference being these two clutch housings here were pretty full with water, and it's actually sat here in the shop so long that most of the water is evaporated out now. We still have a little bit of nasty, scummy water down in there in the bottom, but it was over top of these brake bands last you guys saw it. So I think the first thing I want to do is drain those cases out and kind of flush them out and clean them out good. They don't need to be crazy clean because there's not supposed to be any oil or anything in there. They're supposed to just be high and dry. So there's plugs on the bottom of these compartments, and it actually says in the manual, unless you're running this thing through, deep mud and stuff where you're going to be getting water up into those compartments from the bottom, then you should leave the plugs out, because any moisture or oil that accumulates in the cases can drain out on its own rather than contaminating your clutch packs. Which, if we spend all this time and effort and energy replacing said clutch packs, I sure do not want to be back in there in the near future doing it again because they got contaminated with water or oil. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I did have to order some new parts. I've got a couple throwout bearings here, as well as the seals that keep this bevel gear oil from going over into the clutches, so that should be good. So my inner cheapskate immediately told me to save a buck. We sandblasted all those clutch discs, and upon pricing out all the clutches and the parts for repairing the clutches, that was a colossal waste of my time. Even after sandblasting all the plates, they still obviously didn't look fantastic. They've been through some stuff. So after I priced everything out, it made a lot more sense to just go ahead and order all new steels and frictions and springs, because if you guys remember in the last video, I know it's been a while back, but scratch your memory there, or go watch the video again, I wouldn't complain. Our springs and keepers all kind of got a little torch action because I could not get the old clutch packs apart. And upon trying to torch the keepers off, the heat from the torch just destroyed the springs. As you can see, they're all cattywampus there. And I really didn't think they could be reused correctly. So I ordered all new parts, and that should be what's in these boxes here. They've been sitting around here for months now collecting dust, and I haven't opened them. So let's crack these bad boys open finally, see what we got. Oh yeah. I got no affiliation with these guys, but I ordered my parts from tractorparts.com. I don't typically just give random shout outs to companies like that, but you know what? A company that's still supporting these old cats, and it seems like a nice small mom and pop operation, I'll support them all day long, because Caterpillar does a good job supplying parts for a lot of this old stuff. I did not approach them about these parts because I kind of doubt that they still offer them, and if they do, whew, I quiver to think of what they would charge for them. So this looks like a new stack of steels right here. And these guys look like our new bimetal friction discs. So these friction plates here are not the same as what came out of the machine. They're an updated bimetallic type friction, which I believe should be less prone to sticking and hanging up, and have a longer wear life too, I believe. So these should be quite the upgrade. They also wrapped us up all the springs here that we needed. Yep, over here it looks like more of the same. Beautiful. Now we just have to start making our clutch material sandwiches here. I don't know how well it's really going to convey on camera, but man, I'm super glad we went with new steels instead of trying to run these ones that we sandblasted. There is just a ton of wear and pitting and everything going on in these things. I had even considered sending them to my buddy that works at a machine shop, having him run them through their big surface grinders. But I think by the time they cleaned up, there wouldn't have been anything left of these things. And again, these weren't that much more money, so I probably would have ended up having more wrapped up in surface grinding these things for them to be junk. Something I've been asked to do in the past and always been a little bit skeptical to do is autograph some stuff for you guys and put it up for sale on the store. Growing popularity on YouTube has always been kind of one of those things for me that I never anticipated in life, never looked for any kind of notoriety for anything. So when people ask for an autograph, to me, it's like, I'm just one of you guys. I don't get it to me, but I appreciate all you guys thinking that I'm somebody. I'm definitely not, by the way, but I've gotten so many requests for it that I guess now's a good time to do it. I've got plenty of the same unique little niche item here that some of you guys will appreciate hanging up on your wall. So what I'm going to do with these clutch plates is go ahead and autograph them and stick a Diesel Creek sticker on there, and I'm going to stick these up for sale on the store. And they probably won't be there by the time you watch this video, but I'll try to let you know in a future video when I get that done and posted. All right, so first thing first here, before we can start making up our clutch sandwiches here, these new steel discs all come with oil on them to prevent rusting while they're sitting on a shelf somewhere before they're sold. And I could sit here and wipe them all down each individually with brake clean, or I could just throw them in the big parts washer. Well, they're stacked as good as I can get them. None of them are sitting so that they're flush on each other. The water will be able to get between all the discs. Might have to run it for a few minutes and then kind of turn some of them and run it again for a couple minutes, but this should work. All right, give these things a minute or two to dry off here. The hot water evaporates super quick, so it doesn't take very long. And the soap that's in the water doesn't let this bare metal rust now. Well, while we had our clutch steels over in the dishwasher there, I was over here dipping my toes back into the water of this project and doing a little bit of prep work here and ahead of our reassembly. This whole top of the transmission case here is a sealing surface, and of course it was layered up with tons of gunk and silicone and everything else, so I scraped it all down really nice. Tedious process there. Got all the old sealer off, and then I ran a tap down through all the holes, cleaned out all the junk and debris in the holes, made sure all of our threads are good, and I think we're ready to start cleaning out these nasty, nasty clutch cases. Have a gander at just how disgusting these things really are here. It's like grease mixed with pond scum. Oh, ugh. Cue the Ernest P. Worrell reference. Ew. Anyways, my plan here is there are drain plugs on the bottom. So my plan here is to get these drain plugs open down here. Oh wow, actually coming out fairly easy. That wasn't on my bingo card. You guys ready to release the shmoo? Ugh, I don't think I am. This is gonna be nasty. I'm telling you, this machine's been sitting in the shop for months now, and it smells like pond scum every time you walk past it. Nasty, moldy, oily water. Of course, this side isn't being so cooperative. There we go. I don't think Caterpillar designed that tool to work like that, but it does. All right, not as much shmoo on this side, but it's still promising to be gross. Oh yeah, it's running all over my hand. Ew. Well, with the water drained out of the clutch compartments here, my plan is to get some diesel fuel and dump it down here in the pan, and then have my Milwaukee pump just circulating the diesel fuel from the pan up in here, and I'll just keep hosing it down and working all the grease and sludge and crap out of here that I can't get with a scraper, because I'm going to scrape it first, but it's going to be a process. So let's get into this thing. Oh boy. What a difference. You can actually see the casting now and see that it has like a casting sealer going on in there. Couldn't see any of that before. It's not perfect. I mean, if you had a steam jenny and this thing was outside, you could steam jenny it and get it a bit cleaner, but for in the shop and didn't make a giant mess everywhere, that worked out really well. There's the box of gunk that I scraped out of there prior to getting the diesel after it. We'll get some rags and finish wiping the rest of the residue out of there from the diesel, but all in all, I am very happy with that. I guess now we can start putting our clutch packs together. This is the inner hub. This is the outer hub / brake drum. I have all the surfaces prepped out on them. I gave them a decent sandblast. I didn't want to go too crazy on them and make them too rough of a surface. But it was easiest to sandblast to clean out all these little fingers in here. There's a lot of rust in them before. They're not perfect, but they'll be okay. I already test fit one of the friction discs in there, and it still slides in those grooves. Pretty nice. So I've never done one of these before. I got my reference book here, so I can keep checking that, make sure I'm not screwing up it anyway, and probably still will anyway. Let's slap this together. Basically all you got to do here is start with a clutch lined disc. We'll drop that down in there first. Make sure it goes all the way down. Then we'll do a steel disc. Just like that, and then we're going to alternate all the way up until we're up here to the top flush. And as you can see, the lined clutch discs are engaging with this outer hub. These steel clutch discs are engaging with the inner hub, so when you're under tension, you know, these two pieces are going to turn together, and then when you pull the steering clutch and it takes the pressure off of this pack and lets it expand, now these hubs can turn independently, and that's how the clutch works. Okay, I think that is it. So now we can take our pressure plate. Alright, we put our keeper pins down through there. We can slide our springs over the pins now. Getting a little bit creative here trying to put these back together. I can't seem to get the pin to line up with the keeper. Come on. I think it's gonna rain. That or Garth Brooks just got here. There we go. Whew. Got one keeper in there. I gotta grab a pick so I can spin that keeper around and stick another one in there. That is scary. A lot of spring tension there. Ooh! There we go. That's one down. Whole bunch more to go. It's all pretty scary until you get the first keeper in. Once the first keeper's in, it's a little less hairy. It doesn't seem like it'd be a good place to get your fingers pinched. Why won't you go in there? Ooh. There we go. Finally got both keepers in. Well, there you have it. 2 steering clutch packs rebuilt, ready for installation. I hit them with a quick coat of cat yellow paint just to keep them from rusting up real bad, since I sandblasted those inner and outer clutch pressure plates. Nothing fancy, just to keep the rust at bay. It doesn't exactly look nice, but you'll never see these anyway. While the paint's tacking up on those clutch packs, we can start prepping out our pinion shaft for installation here, or reassembly, whatever you want to call it. We got to take these guys off of here. These are bearing housings and seal housings. These seals are what keep the bevel gear oil from the transmission from spilling over into these clutch housings. So we need to replace the seals here, but these actual bearings that the shaft rides on look to be in pretty good shape, so we're letting those go for now. What we are replacing are these guys. This guy here slides on that pinion shaft and is what actually pushes against the steering clutch packs that we just reassembled there. This is what releases them. So all the force of pushing against those clutch packs goes under this bearing here. This one here isn't terrible. If they were both like this, I probably would have let them go. But this one here, as you can see, looks a little bit worse. When I removed it from the shaft, it actually just completely fell apart. It's pretty well pooched. So there's a snap ring here. We got to pull the snap rings out, and then we can just drive those bearings out. Press the new ones in. Got new bearings. We got new seals for these guys. Let's get moving. Well, I'm sure the guy that engineered this thing back in the 40s is dead now, but I'd like to shake his hand because he actually left us some punch ports here so we can knock this race out. Nailed it! Jesus. Wowzers. I don't know if I caught that on camera, but that was close. That thing went flying out of there. About took off my face. You got to make sure these things are cleaned up really good too when you're done here, because these areas up here are actually oil collection ports. So these things sit upright in your transmission like so, and oil flings around the case, and it actually lands down in these little troughs, and then there's a hole drilled through down into the bearing area, and it fills up a little gallery here behind the bearing and gives constant oil lubrication to your throwout bearing. The other one, I just cleaned it out, and the one side was pretty well gunked up. There was no way oil was getting through that one. This one here looks pretty good, but we'll clean them out and blow them out and make sure everything's copacetic anyhow. Also, a little tidbit worth mentioning. So as I'm saying, these fill with oil, and they let the oil come in down here, and they have a groove cut in behind the bearing here, and kind of a low spot recessed out so that it gives the oil a place to fill up and lubricate the bearing from. But these two punch holes here that we were just driving the bearing out with, they got to do something about that, otherwise all the oil would come out there. So what they did was they put little freeze plugs in there, just like so, and that's actually what I was punching against first until we got the bearing down far enough for those to go through and fall out. So we'll have to expand these again and reuse them because I sure don't have replacements. Well, with that all cleaned out, I guess we're ready to reinstall the bearings. Anytime I've done this in the past, people give me flack for it. And no, driving a bearing in with a hammer is not the quote-unquote correct way to do it. But if you do it right and you're careful, you can do it without damaging anything. If you're watching when I'm tapping this thing, I'm making sure that the contact area of my hammer is only tapping on this outside race. And as you can see, I'm not banging it for all I'm worth. I'm just tapping it, because basically if you just keep it perfectly square as you're going down there, it'll go. I mean, it's snug, but it'll go without a lot of force. Really, I'm just letting the weight of the hammer do all the work. Now that we got it down where it's flush, take a small punch, not a sharp one, just a dull one. But again, we're barely even hitting this thing, and this is super hard bearing steel. It's harder than my hammer is. You're not going to really hurt it unless you go crazy on it. We're just lightly whacking it. Did you guys hear that big pitch change when we bottomed out there? That's how you know you're home. Now the bearing's all the way in there. We got this little oil shield that also helps hold oil in around those balls in the bearing there. That goes on there, and then we get this spring ring that about took off my face there earlier, and work it back in here, ideally without taking off your face. Like so. And that's it. That's done, rebuilt, ready for installation. I lied. We got to put our little freezy plugs in the back here so we don't lose all our oil again. So all I'm going to do to reuse these things is take this is a domed point chisel, stick it in the top of the freeze plug and give it a whack, and that should kind of expand the fat part of it open again so it'll hold in the bore there. Oh yeah, nailed it. Now it's all rebuilt and ready for installation. If you guys are doing something like this, it's important, since these are bearing races that have worn together now. It's important you keep those with the corresponding bearing. So I've got a paint mark on here to make sure this goes back on the correct side of the shaft. Finally, time to start reassembly here. First thing I'm doing is gonna pre-lube our seal surfaces here and our lips on the seals so that we don't run them dry and tear them up right away. I've paid close attention here, and I've really wiped everything down good, make sure there's no dirt and contaminants on it, since it's been sitting here torn apart in the shop for so long. All right, feeling pretty good about that. Clutches are still a little bit tacky, but we're going to have to deal with it. Now that nut can't back off. I don't know if these set screws are a factory original cat locking system or not. They're not perfectly even, like somebody hand drilled them, and this one is different from the other one, so I'm kind of thinking they're not. Regardless, I like it. Staking is a really good way to lock things down. Well, with our shaft assembled here, we're ready to try to press it together. To get the clutch assemblies completely seated onto that shaft, we need to press them together. Now, I don't have the fancy shaft adapter here for a hollow ram setup that Caterpillar wants you to use, but I think I can improvise and just push them both at the same time on the shop press. I think that's going to work just fine for us. Also, while I was leafing around here in the book, it says those set screws to stake those nuts in place on our thrust bearings, it shows them here in the book, but it's having you drill them. So I don't think they were there originally from the factory, but if you were in there, it wants you to stake them. So that must just be an update kind of thing. There's a lot of places in this literature that it says stuff for like earlier tractors and later tractors because there were revisions along the line. Here's a good illustration of how Caterpillar wants you to remove and affix the clutches to the shaft there. They've got a big fancy hydraulic press thing going on there, but we ain't got that. It also says that we should be pushing those clutches onto the shaft with 15 to 20 tons of pressure. Man, that seems like a lot. And those are just a tapered spline, so man, that's really tight. So the way Caterpillar wants you to push these onto the shaft is not actually to push them, but more to pull them. They have the hollow ram set up here, and then they have an adapter where you hook onto the shaft. You're pulling against this clutch hub, drawing the shaft up into that spline fit. What I'm thinking of doing is basically just like you see it there, putting it into the shop press there vertically, and you know, you can't push on the outside of that clutch hub, so take something like a couple sockets that'll give you the clearance for around your shaft there and press the actual inner hubs of the clutch baskets together onto the shaft. This claims it's a 30-ton press. I claim BS. Well, it says 60,000 pounds pressure, but it's only a 20-ton jack, so that math ain't mathin'. I think it's pretty funny. It's easier to move the press than the thing I'm pressing. How about that shop crane, huh? When's the guy gonna finish that? It's actually all going to work out really good. A little time consuming to get it set up right, but I think it's going to work. Okay, it took 11, almost 12 minutes to get it in the press and ready to push, but I think we're ready to go here. I'm going to take a measurement from the plate to the top clutch here first to see where we're at, and then I'm going to put some pressure on it and see if it moves or how much it moves or whatever. As you can see, I don't have a pressure gauge on this little cheapo press here, so I can't exactly say yes, I put 15 or 20 tons on it. I think we're pretty much just going to give her all she's got. We're 25 1/4 right now. Let's put some pressure on it and see what happens. Oh, about all she's got. I don't expect it to move much. That's about all I can do for it, really, with the equipment that I've got here. I have a sneaking suspicion that whoever did this job last didn't do this at all. I think they just set her on there, probably give it a couple good whacks with the sledgehammer, and then ran the nut down as hard as they could. So at least we're giving it the old college try here. Yeah, we took it down a fair bit. It went from 25 1/4 to 25 1/8. I feel pretty good about it. Back several months ago when we disassembled this thing, I had to break out my 1-inch impact gun and the giant air compressor because I had been a little too cheap to buy the cordless one. But not no mo. I decided I'd do enough remote work out in the field that the 1-inch gun was justifiable. Crank it down a little bit with the ratchet first just to make sure the threads aren't crossed. We're going to send this little guy into orbit here. It's tight. Got that thing tightened down just right so that our locking thing here lines up. At least I think it lines up. Man, that's really close. It's like actually a fuzz too tight. Needs like a half a ugga dugga backwards. Well, that's one side completely done. Now we just gotta flip it over, rinse and repeat. How about that shop crane? Ready for installation. Woo! I'm excited. We are getting somewhere. Okay, just a quick break from the chaos here. You guys know how life gets. Between working on equipment and building stuff, and just trying to keep life moving, things get pretty busy. And the last thing I want to do at the end of any day is spend an hour cooking and cleaning up or having to go to the grocery store and buy food. I'm not a big fan of any of that. That's where Factor comes in. Factor for me has been an absolute game changer. These meals show up right to your door, fresh, never frozen, chef crafted, and they're ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And we're not talking about any of this gas station mystery food or frozen TV dinners. This is not that. Factor has tons of different meal options to choose from every week. Not to mention they have things like Calorie Smart, Keto, Vegan, Veggie, Protein Plus, and more. So every box will have just what you're looking for. I'm telling you, you will not believe how delicious these meals are until you try them for yourselves. For myself, I've been a big fan of the Protein Plus meals. They keep me fueled up and ready to tackle whatever project comes up next. Don't take my word for it though. Try it for yourself. Head on over to factor75.com. Use my link down in the description there and the code 50CREEK to get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's code 50CREEK at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Now that's a deal that's hard to beat. Anyways, lunch is over. I'm full. Let's get back to work. All right, we're ready to install our clutch assembly here. However, I don't want to dip it back into this nasty old oil. And I can't get the drain plug out of the bottom. Not to mention the plug's up in the middle. So back here is not going to drain anyway. So I'm just going to pump it out. Well, I shut her down about 2 a.m. last night, but not before I got everything in here prepped out and ready for reassembly, with the exception of our brakes here. That's the last thing we have to do before we can drop our new clutch shaft back in there. Well, it's not a new shaft, but rebuilt shaft. So if you guys remember, we took the brake bands out in 3 pieces. You have your bottom, intermediate, and top shoe. I've kind of already got this one mocked up here just so you can see what it looks like assembled, but you can't put it in as one piece because those drums there that slide over our steering clutches have to be able to lower down inside of this band. You could probably bolt these all together, put them around the drums, and then lower it all in as a unit, but it would take probably an extra guy to try to fish this stuff all in together where it needs to go. It's easier for my needs if we just put it in like this, and it's not even fully bolted up there so that the top opening here spreads apart as it hangs in the machine there. Doing it like that should allow the brake hub to set down inside of this thing, and then through the back cover on the transmission there, we can tighten up these bolts on the brake bands. It was a job getting these little keeper pins out of here. This guy here just slides in, but you barely have enough clearance to make it happen down in here. Well, actually, I'm over here complaining about it, but that went really easy. Well, I did some reevaluating. I studied our situation better, and I don't think that having those pinned on already is going to be the answer. I don't think we're going to be able to reach in and get these bolts tightened with that secured. But anyway, they're assembled. They can sit here. Once the hubs and everything are down in here, it shouldn't take a whole lot to spin them and kind of work them and then pin that in on there. Outside of applying a little bit of silicone down here where our bearing housings are going to ride and have to seal up the bevel gear case, I think we're ready to install. Trying to make sure our bearing cages are in the right place. I put some marks on the outer sides of them so I can try to keep an eye on it. Should be good there. Bam! We are officially set in place. Okay, so the next step is we got to get our bearing caps clamped down on here, not real hard, but just enough to hold them in place. And then we're going to have to set the backlash on the pinion and bevel gear here. All right, we need to pay attention when we stick our bearing caps on here because there's a little dowel that sticks out here in the cap, and that's supposed to engage in this little groove right here. And as you can see by how marred up it is and beat around there, apparently people have some problem with that. But I think we're pretty good because it sits down in there nice and tight, sits down on both edges. I don't think we're held up at all. It looks really good. On either side of our bearing caps, you probably can't see this one because of the bevel gear, but there's these adjusting nuts here that change the preload on the bearings and where they sit in their respective races, and that is what sets the backlash. This one here has not moved since we disassembled it. You can see it's actually still lined up. The keeper would go right in there, but I removed it just so we didn't have to fight anything, or we might have to adjust it anyhow. I don't know if it was set right when we disassembled it. This side over here behind the bevel gear, I moved it a bit so we could get this thing installed. Looks pretty easy to set the backlash though. We're going to put some bolts in these caps and snug them but not tighten them. Then we'll put a dial indicator on the pinion gear and block this bevel gear so that it can't turn, and we'll check the backlash in the pinion. Okay, so with the bearing caps snugged down, the manual says to block this bevel gear so that it can't turn. So I just took a plastic felling wedge, jammed her down in there, and there's zero movement out of that thing now. So we should be able to come back here, and there we go. That's our backlash right there. The difference between those two stopping points, and that's a lot. So I moved the indicator to a different place here. The book says to try it in a few different spots and kind of take an average of your readings. We're supposed to have between 7 and 9 thousandths. That's more like 30. According to the book, if our backlash is too great, which it's way too great right now, it says to loosen this adjusting nut and tighten this adjusting nut an equal amount. That's just driving this gear deeper into the pinion gear. Well, we tightened it up a little bit, but I think we need to go a little ways more. Okay, so what I just did there with the red marks was I divided this ring gear into 4 sections, because it's telling me in the manual to check this backlash in 4 different positions here. Getting an indicator on this thing is quite the challenge here. I think I've done it different every time now. I'd like to set it and forget it, but it gets in the way of the adjusting. Alright, bevel gear is locked. There we go. That is not bad there. Might have gone a little too much. How many thou is that? Ha ha! That looks perfect. We're right on. Looks like 7. Looks like it's between 7 and 8 thousandths from what I can see there, which is perfectly within spec. And according to the manual, we should be setting it based upon the tightest spot, which it seems like I have. So there's a couple quadrants that are a little looser, maybe around 10, 11 thousandths, but the tightest area is still within spec at 8 thousandths. So I like it. I think we're gonna crank it down and send it. Now, I've read through the manual a couple times now, and it does not really tell you if you're supposed to torque these cap bolts down or what the deal is there. All the while, I'm going to make sure that we continue to have rolling free play here and we're not tightening our bearings or anything. Alright, well, I got them pretty tight, and it still rolls nice, so I'm going to call that good. Bend these locking tabs up, and then we're ready to put our cover back over the bevel gears. Okay, bevel gear cover going on. Got our bevel gear cover on here, but I seem to have misplaced the nuts and washers for that thing. I can't find them anywhere. I'm sure they're here somewhere, but our savior, oh, the bolt bin, can hook us up here a lot faster. I don't remember if it had lock washers on those or not, but if we have room, we're going to put them on. I've said it before, best thing in the shop. Doesn't look like we really have room for lock washers on here, and I kind of don't feel like that had lock washers originally anyhow. There we go, we're getting her drawn down now. It's pretty tight, and we got gasket maker coming out everywhere. Everything still spins freely. Holy crap. That was a pile of work. This is taking a little bit more time than I kind of envisioned that it would. But we're getting there. Everything is done here. We are ready to put the transmission cover back on. Well, I do have to still adjust the brakes, but you can do that with the cover on. It's not really mandatory, but it's probably a little bit easier without the cover. I've got the cover suspended over here so I can get it cleaned up and ready to install it, but I forgot about this. This is like a helper spring to make it easier to pull the steering clutches, and this one is broken. So you got like a bell crank that comes out here and hooks on each side, but this one is missing. Luckily enough, I have the pieces. This was in the toolbox of the machine. I think I can weld it back together. We just gotta pull this bell crank off here and drive the shaft upwards so we can get it all apart and onto the bench to weld it. This thing is in there. If I was even just a little bit more confident that I could weld it in the case here, I would, but it'd be pretty difficult. The bell crank came off. And it won't quit raining. We have gotten so much rain this month alone. It is incredible. Every single day there's like a thunderstorm and we get a half-inch of rain. Brutal. Oh! Got her out. There's your problem right there. Well, we got her all positioned in the vise here, ready to tack this thing back together. There you go. Good as used. Need one more pin for up here. Nailed it! The bell crank's all fixed up now. All we have to do is put these helper springs back on. According to the manual, you're supposed to run this down until the spring measures 10 1/4. Got a little bit to go. All right, officially ready to go on. After I apply a liberal amount of silicone. By Lord George, I think we got it. That is tricky by yourself. Gonna adjust our steer clutches now. Oh yeah, they actually work. So if you guys remember, these adjustments here is basically just a ball and socket in there, and I'm just running these down until they take up the tension in the ball and socket. I don't want to put any amount of force on them because you're basically pushing against your steer clutches all the time then. I'm going until they encounter a little resistance and then backing off a little bit. There we go. Something's hanging up there in that bell crank that we had to fix. I oiled it, so I'm hoping it starts to get a little better here. It works, but I just don't understand why it's making that clicking noise. But as you can see, everything appears to be working. Pretty excited. With our adjustments made, we have to set the lock nut here to keep them from moving, getting out of whack again. There we go. Steer clutches are set. Now with the transmission cover on there, we have affirmatively put a lid on the project of doing the steering clutches, and I am just itching to get this thing fired up and take it out for a spin. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today. There's actually a considerable amount of work left before we can take this thing out for a spin. I was really hoping to get that all done. I have been going gangbusters. As you guys saw last night, I was out here till 2 a.m. trying to get this thing wrapped up. But it's 6 o'clock on Saturday, and that reminds me of a good Garth Brooks song. But anywho, there's a lot more to do here. Unfortunately, we're gonna shut her down here. We wrapped up the steering clutches, they're done. They seem like they're working. I can't wait to test them, but if you guys remember, we have to fix the Bendix. Right there, there's an arm busted off the Bendix. It was working in the last video, but seems like we should probably fix that while we have access to it before we get the cover back on there. I'm gonna grab the fuel tank off of the parts machine outside and put it on here. We're gonna have to put the fenders back on before we can take it for a ride. And down here, this guy, that kind of a yoke thing that holds the front idler, blown out. That's a project unto itself right there. So there's still plenty of work to do on the D4, but we're getting there. So if you like these videos, stay tuned. There's gonna be more coming up here in the future because I want this thing out of my shop, and I also want to be able to push some dirt with it. So in addition to fixing all that stuff and putting it all back together in the next video, we're also going to do a complete service on it. Who knows the last time the oil was changed in this beast. So we're going to drain out the oil completely, put some fresh oil in it, filters, fill the transmission up with fresh oil. And then, finally, I think we're going to be able to take this thing out and see what it'll do. It has been a long time coming. I know one thing we could do too, is take it down off this cribbing, make it a little easier to work on. All that and more in the next video. If you like this one though, do me a big favor. Hit that thumbs up button down below the video. It really helps out my channel. It doesn't cost you guys a dime. If you would like to help support the channel in a little more direct fashion, you can head on over to dieselcreek.com, or I turned on the fancy little merch shelf down there below the video, so maybe you can or can't see my merch there right below the video. I don't quite understand how to work it yet. If you see anything that tickles your fancy down there, feel free. Or head on over to the store, that's dieselcreek.com. Link, as always, down in the description there. We're in the process of releasing some new merch. I just posted a new one for sale today up there at the store. There's a picture of it right there. It's pretty sweet. We also have several more in the works up and coming. So pick yourself up a couple shirts at the store and be looking good for summertime. Anyways, that's a wrap for me. So until the next time, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you later.